Hi everyone, nubkeks here and welcome back to Nub Raids. In today's video, I want to go through my top 10 damage dealers for the Hydra clan boss, incorporating all difficulties here as well, and every single rarity of hero. No rares showing up, really no surprise, but we actually have kind of a nice mix of epic and legendary heroes in today's list. As always, let me know what you think about this list as well, and if you have any honorable mentions, if there's any champions that really should have been high up on the list that I didn't put on, let me know in the comments, and yeah, let's see. Okay, so for my first one, in 10th place, and very much I think in the 10th spot here, is actually a bit of a surprise. It's Cupidus. Yeah, Cupidus, definitely not a hero, looking ridiculous in his Valentine's Day setup here. Not a hero that really was in the meta all that much before Hydra, but he's come in and he does a couple of things which kind of set him apart and make him actually function very, very well. I think one of the big things that does make him strong is this unique passive, which is very hard to activate. 25% more damage to targets under debuffs, but this only happens when Venus is on the same team. Venus is a Void legendary. She has AoE defense down and weaken and AoE HP burn, so she's a very, very good champion for the Hydra. And if you have both of them together, it makes for a very strong combo. He's got a couple of nice little bits, but it's really his A1 that sets him apart. But his A3, he can give himself increased attack and do a single target smack. So if you need to bring that for your team, for him, you can do that. He can also supplement a little bit with HP burns if you really need that as well. He can do that too. But the main thing he's doing, I think, is his Heartbreaker move. AoE attack A1, 15% more damage if the target has any debuffs. So this actually hits very hard. He's a nice, very fast hero. He's got tons of health as well. So he's not too bad to keep alive. And you just build him to smack really hard. He just keeps doing that A1. And it's doing 15% more damage because they're always going to have debuffs. And he's going to do another 25% more damage because you're going to have Venus with him. And yeah, he's just going to plow out tons of AoE damage. And that's what he does. It's actually relatively straightforward, but he does it really well. And yeah, I'm kind of happy to see Cupidus actually being kind of a beast for Hydra. It's been pretty fun. And then another champion that I think is kind of underrated, but I think is very solid for Hydra, is actually Tamesia. I think Tamesia is awesome here. And she's a Void legendary, relatively new. So, not a lot of people have her. You won't see a ton of people using her, but she's very effective. The core of what she does really comes from her A2. Cunning Chaos, which when it's booked up is an AoE attack with a 3-turn cooldown that has 100% chance of putting HP burn for 3 turns, right? So she's Void, she's a Void champion, she'll never weak hit, apart from the Poison Cloud, right? But she's never going to weak hit due to affinity. It's an AoE attack, 100%, and it's on for 3 turns, it has a 3-turn cooldown. She is to HP burn what Umbral Enchantress is to block buffs. Okay, it's just that really simple, really straightforward 100% uptime, which just is going to add up to a ton of really easy, really consistent damage over your Hydra runs. It adds up to quite a lot. She can also put decreased speed with the same move, which is a phenomenal thing to bring. Her A3 does more single target damage for every HP burn that's on in the fight. And then her A1 can put decreased defense, 100% chance to place it if the target's under a HP burn. She doesn't have terrible stats at all. She's okay-ish defensively. She's not going to do crazy, damage. Her multipliers aren't insane or anything like that, but she is going to, contribute a decent amount of physical damage, but it's really in just that consistent, super reliable source of HP burn that makes her good. She doesn't have, like, the high highs that the other champions on this list tend to have, but she also doesn't have their lows either. She is just consistently really good. Which is kind of what you want in the, there's a little bit of RNG in the Hydra. So having someone that just is consistently awesome is kind of a nice thing. Next up, we're going to one of my personally most successful champions for Hydra, because I obviously don't have all of these champions, but Ninja. And obviously, as always, condolences to anyone that wasn't playing during the Ninja promotion, because it's highly likely, due to legal reasons, I suspect he'll never bring it back. Ninja does a couple of things, and he does a couple of things very well. So number one, he's just going to hit really hard due to his passive. His attack can increase up to 100% and his crit damage up to 25% bonus against bosses. That stacks up as he hits them all with his abilities. And in a fight like Hydra, which is very long, he can stack this up and start to actually hit physically very hard. He can put decreased defense on his A1, gives him some turn meter. His A2 is 3 random hits that put HP burn for 3 turns, gives him perfect veil, and then also activates those HP burns against bosses, which just does an instant poof of damage, which is awesome. Against bosses, his A3 ignores 50% of defense. So he's doing a number of things. He's hitting hard, he veils himself up, brings some burns, some decreased defense as well. Yeah, he's a solid champion. I do think that one of the bigger or only really downsides of Ninja is that he is obviously then very gear intensive. He needs accuracy for these burns, right? He needs lots of accuracy. He also needs speed so he can stack escalation quickly. He needs all of his crit rate. He needs crit damage to hit hard. He needs attack to scale up with escalation as well. So he needs all of the offensive stats, basically. He needs every single one, which does mean that, you know, your stat budget, the stuff you can actually achieve with your gear, is going to leave him lacking on the defenses, which does make it harder, I think, to use him well in those higher levels of Hydra. It's just tough to keep him alive, but if you can keep him alive through a long fight, he's going to do an absolute ton of damage. He's very, very good. And he's a champion that if you've been playing in the last year, you will have him. So he's a fantastic option. Jumping up to 7th place then, a champion I wish I had. I think she's probably the coolest looking champion in the game. Like, wow, Cecilia Flametongue. How cool is Cecilia Flametongue? Damn, she looks so badass. This is our other sort of AoE HP burner, but she brings more utility than Tamesia at the cost of being less reliable. So her A3, 4-turn cooldown, this is what puts the HP burns on, puts HP burn on herself, then does an AoE attack, 100% chance of putting HP burn on all enemies for 3 turns, and gives her an extra turn if it's placed on all enemies. So when this works well, this obviously works incredibly well. When it doesn't work well, I mean, she can weak hit if she's going up against any green affinity heads, which could make it so that she misses a HP burn and then doesn't get the extra turn. So there is that inconsistency there. But when this works well, it's a great move, but that is not all. Flame Eruption, her A3, 3-turn cooldown as well when booked, or not as well, but 3-turn cooldown when booked. With those extra turns, it comes up even more frequently, of course. AoE attack, 100% chance of putting weaken for 2 turns, and 100% chance of placing decreased defense if there's 2 enemy under HP burns, then instantly activates any HP burn on each target and decreases the duration of those HP burns by 1 turn, right? So she has like this 1-2 combo. She comes in, does an AoE attack, puts burn on everyone for 3 turns, gets an extra turn potentially, does another AoE attack, weaken, decrease defense, activates all the HP burns. Bam! Huge nuke of damage, really powerful. She has accuracy in all battles aura if you need it. Her passive probably not going to do too much for you, but it's something to bear in mind. And then she has a triple hitter A1, which can increase the duration of HP burns on the target, which is nice as well. So yeah, she's coming in. As you can see, she's pretty squishy. She's also kind of slow. So in terms of her stats, she's maybe a little bit lacking there, but she's going to put out a ton of damage and also bring you a couple of really powerful debuffs here with the decreased defense and the weaken, the HP burn. She's bringing you all the stuff you need to do way more damage. So yeah, Cecilia's a very strong option if you can play around her affinity for it. Then finally in 6th place, and this is sort of a bit of a cutoff point, I feel, in the video, where the top 5 are kind of another level, but you have to give a shout out here to Trunda. You know, Boomer, I think, was the first one, as far as I know, who discovered just how ridiculous Trunda is for Hydra, just how insane she is. So far, I haven't seen her being overly successful in the higher difficulties of Hydra, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that comes with time, and maybe Trunda will shoot up this list. I'm sure you've seen Trunda against normal, even against hard difficulty Hydra for sure as well, just absolutely ripping the thing apart. How does it work? Well, she has an AoE attack that obviously hits really hard on her A3, and that's nice, but it's her A2, which hilariously doesn't do anything like what it says in the tooltip. Attacks one enemy, then attacks all enemies with the second hit. That does 60% of the damage inflicted from the first hit. Sounds straightforward, right? Hilarious thing is, it doesn't do that at all. It does way more damage than that. Someone could explain it in the comments that knows exactly what is going on here. There's some weird ass stuff happening with the coding. It's been broken forever. I remember, before I was a content creator, watching Hell Hades complaining and saying that, this is broken and they should nerf her and fix it. And there was community uproar and everyone hated it. So, yeah, and they never fixed it, of course. So I kind of suspect they never will. I'd like it at least if they updated the tooltip so it accurately reflects what her skill actually does. But basically, long story short, by the way, crazy HP and resistance too, yeah? Trunda comes in and she just has the hardest hitting raw damage in the game against the Hydra. She absolutely blasts those heads. So it's especially potent, like I said, on the lower difficulties where the Hydras have less defense and she can just rip through them. She just claps them. She is like the easiest, the hardest hitting, right, in the game. She just hits so hard. Long cooldown, four turn cooldown, long cooldown, but it just hits so hard. Absolutely destroys them. Yeah, Trunda, really strong. Then we have the top 5. And for these top 5, I think these are the 5 that sort of set themselves apart as being consistently part of these like really higher end teams. Oftentimes, not only are they bringing really good damage, but half the time it's about the utility that they bring their team as well. The first one I want to talk about here is mushallad. Mushallad? I don't even know how to say his name. How do you say his name? But yeah, salad. He's insane. He's insane. Really good damage and also great utility. And if we look at his kit here, it's almost like he was designed specifically for Hydra. It's kind of nuts. So start with his A2 Tornado, 3-turn cooldown, increased speed, increased crit damage on all allies, True Fear and Leech on all enemies for 2 turns, and gives him an extra turn. So the True Fear obviously doesn't work, but increased speed, helping your team go faster. This is a big deal. Helps you hit those speed thresholds much more easily. And bear in mind, you are on a timer with the Hydra. The timer is you've got so many turns before the Hydra heads will eat your champions. So many Hydra turns, that is. So you want to squeeze out more turns. You want to slow them down. You want to take more turns compared to how many turns they're taking to get as much damage out. He helps you do that. The crit damage is nice. And AoE Leech, I think, is extremely underrated. I think that Leech just generally is underrated, probably because of the unkillable clan boss meta, where it became not so important. But yeah, if you think back to what was the old Demon Lord clan boss meta before unkillable, it was all about that lifesteal, because just the amount of healing you get from just your damage, plus War Master, Giant Slayer procs, all that sort of stuff with lifesteal, which is the same as Leech, it just adds up to so much healing, so much survivability, and Mushallad brings that for your team. He can help you keep all of your damage, all of your characters actually, alive very easily, do a ton of healing with this, as well as these buffs. Then his A3 steals all buffs from a target before attacking, puts 2 continuous heals on him for 3 turns, does a ton of, it just really big single target smack that can steal buffs, and not just remove them, but steal them. And yeah, it just keeps him alive. So, if a Hydra head does get a whole bunch of buffs, if Head of Mischief does steal it, it gives you an option. It gives you a way around it where he can steal those buffs back, massively keep himself alive, and just hit really hard. And then his A1 is a really unique interaction. So number 1, he attacks one enemy and heals himself by 30% of the damage inflicted. So again, very easy to keep him alive. And then attacks enemies under Leech debuffs. And the crucial thing about this is that the Hydra heads have AoE damage reduction. If you look at their passives, it'll be like 10% reduced damage to all Hydra heads from AoE. A couple of the heads have 30% reduced damage from AoE to all Hydra heads. This move is technically a single target attack against everyone under Leech, so it bypasses that AoE damage reduction, so therefore actually does a ton of damage. So really hard hitting A1 as well. Yeah, as you can see, he's got it all. He's got great damage, really good damage, great survivability, great buffs for your team, great debuffs for your team to keep you running fast, to keep you alive. I think Mushallad, he's the real deal, and that's why I'm saying like these are the absolute, these top 5 are the absolute, the pinnacle really. Now, interestingly enough, we're actually going to a couple of epics here in a row that do a very similar thing. The first one I want to talk about here is Royal Guard. For one very simple reason, it's all about this move, Takedown, 4-turn cooldown, AoE attack that does damage based on enemy max HP. So as you scale up the Hydra difficulties, as their max HP increases, this move just hits insanely hard, right? This move becomes the easiest way to do a massive hit to those Hydra heads. because it doesn't matter that their stats have scaled up. This move just scales on with them, which is insanely good. The other really interesting thing about it is that he doesn't need attack. The damage comes from crit damage. So in order for Royal Guard to be a damage monster, he just needs crit damage. Like, he doesn't need accuracy. He doesn't need attack. You can really leave those things and pump up his HP a ton more to try keep him alive. You can do stuff like that and still hit insanely hard. Now, if you can bring accuracy, it's kind of nice. He's got a 4-hitter at random that can place decreased speed for 2 turns, which is pretty cool. He can also place decreased defense on his A1. These are both based off of attack, so they'll do a little bit of damage, and the debuffs are quite nice, but they're kind of optional as well. The main thing is just have him go in here and have him absolutely rip through that max HP. And kind of a big surprise, Royal Guard, he's massively back in the meta, right? He's massively back in the meta. There are no legendaries that do comparable AoE max HP damage. There's no other no legendaries that can do this. So Royal Guard, he's in there. I feel like one day they'll probably put in a Void legendary that does something like this, maybe on a 3-turn cooldown, and everyone is going to want that champion. We'll see if that ever happens. Let's go to one of the most underrated champions in the game that has finally seen the light of day with the Hydra. In 3rd place, it's Husk. I'm actually ranking him a bit above Royal Guard. Husk basically does what Royal Guard does too. Despair. 4-turn cooldown when booked, attacks all enemies. This one has a chance to stun, obviously nothing against the Hydra, but the damage scales based off of enemy max HP. So he does the exact same thing that Royal Guard does. Couple of differences that make me rate him a little bit higher here overall. Number 1, he is a HP based champion. He's got better defense than Royal Guard. His defense still not good, but it's better, and he has a lot of base HP. So you're just building him. It's very easy to keep him alive. He's going to have a ton of health, and boosting up his health also ups the damage he does with his other couple of moves, which is kind of well, actually only with this move. This one's based off attack. I actually didn't know that. But yeah, this one's based off HP, so it does scale up that damage a bit as well. But yeah, he's basically Royal Guard who's easier to keep alive, but you don't have that decreased defense A1. You don't have the multi-hitter that can place decreased speed. You lose some of that utility. The trade-off is a much tankier champion that you can keep alive. Ultimately, it's kind of a toss-up, really. Which one is better? What it's actually going to come down to at the end of the day is which of their affinities is better for that particular rotation of Hydra, right? If red affinity is going to have, if there's a bunch of green affinity Hydra heads in a rotation, Husk falls off and Royal Guard's amazing. If there's a bunch of red affinity heads, then Husk is going to be amazing and Royal Guard is going to suffer. So it kind of depends mostly on that. Maybe you want to bring a mix of the two so you kind of evenly spread the damage across the heads, but either way, they're both incredible champions. But there's still 2 more, and we're sticking in epic territory here. In 2nd place, probably a lot of people's, when Hydra first came out, a lot of people's most wanted champion, and I think he still deserves this really high ranking. It is Inquisitor Chameleon. He's coming in here again. Does he do good damage? Let's talk about that first. He actually does do good damage. He does do good damage. One funny thing, which a lot of people didn't realize, I think, is that every time an enemy puts a debuff on an ally, he counterattacks. They do half normal damage, can't be critical, but this stuff can proc mastery. So you can put him with Giant Slayer, which is a really weird mastery for him. Excuse me, but when the heads come out in like the poison head, if the poison head puts a bunch of poisons on your team, Chameleon just keeps plinking away. You'll be sat there looking at your screen going, dude, stop doing your animations, get a move on, man. He's going to keep plinking away and actually adds up to a lot of damage over the course of the fight. It's actually not too bad. You can put him in a lifesteal set, for example, get tons of healing, and he'll stay very safe in that circumstance too. And then Cow the Horrors, triple hitter, ignores 25% of the target's defense and a further 25% for every buff on this champion. So long as he has 3 buffs on him, he ignores 100% of defense. He doesn't need Savage Gear, right? He doesn't need Helm Smasher, none of that stuff. He'll still ignore 100% of the target's defense. Massive single target damage. I use him obviously in my best Hydra teams, and when someone gets eaten by a Hydra head and you're going, oh my god, how are we going to bust through it? And then it's Chameleon's turn. He has Cow the Horrors ready to go. You're like, okay, we're grand. It's all good. Cow the Horrors. And he just rips through. He just rips through those heads and just basically nukes a champion free and almost a single turn. If I had better gear on mine, he probably would nuke it through in a single turn, but he's a monster in terms of that. So very nice for the Hydra in that sense, but he's not going to do as much damage as the other champions. So why is he in here? The reason is his passive. Not the turn meter fill, but this. Whenever an ally gets fear or true fear from an enemy, he instantly removes the debuff and fills the ally's turn meter by 15%. So it actually doesn't do that. On Hydra, at least, it fills whoever is in your leader position. It fills their turn meter, not the person it got removed from. So essentially, he takes the Head of Torment, which puts true fear on anyone who attacks it without Perfect Veil on. He takes that head and he turns it into basically a turn meter battery for whoever you put in the lead of your team. Fun thing is, even if they fix this and make it do what it actually says, so it would actually fill the turn meter of the particular ally who gets the debuff removed from them, it's still going to be insanely good. It's a ton of turn meter for your team. Yeah, and they've already said that they're not going to nerf him. They specifically said Chameleon's not going to be nerfed. You know, he is just the man-eater of Hydra, basically, is what he is. So good. It takes one of the most annoying heads to play around because Perfect Veil is tough to keep on. It takes that head and it says, actually, this head is just a great thing. This head shows up and you go, awesome. This just made the fight easier. This head doesn't make it harder. This head actually makes it easier because it's giving us so much turn meter. Insane. And you just don't have to worry about True Fear is a horrible debuff. You don't have to worry about that messing up your team. So Chameleon, he's amazing. So good for Hydra. I hope you all get one. I really do. You know, Void Epic. This is the thing, right? As a Void Epic, I think compared to a legendary where you kind of have the expectation that you're not going to get that legendary, right? You have to be realistic here if you're, you know, free to play or low spender. But with a Void Epic, it's like, ooh, I can get that. That is achievable, but they're really hard to get. So I do hope that you get him if you don't have him yet, and he can improve your teams. And then finally, in the number 1 position, I had to put him here. He is my boy, and I think he deserves number 1 for a couple of very particular reasons. Geomancer, shockingly, coming through as the number 1 damage dealer for Hydra. My favorite thing about Geomancer, and the thing that makes him so good, well, there's a bunch of things that make him so good. It's basically his passive. All he needs to do damage is accuracy. What's this crit damage stuff? What's this attack stat? What are these stats you got? What's crit rate? What are you guys all building, putting your stats into that for? Doesn't need any of it. All he needs is enough accuracy to land his 3-turn HP burn on a 3-turn cooldown, and then he's going to deflect 15% of all the damage your entire team takes onto every single enemy under HP burn debuffs. If you slap him with refresh accessories, if you get him in reflex gear that gives him chances to reduce or stop the cooldown of this ability, and he can get multiple burns up on multiple heads, it duplicates that damage onto every single head he has put a HP burn debuff onto, adds up to tons of damage. And also this is another massive chunk, maybe even the biggest chunk, which is essentially a giant slayer effect, does 3% of the target's max HP whenever he is hit, or sorry, 30% chance whenever he's hit to deflect 3% of their max HP as damage. So he's just ripping this max HP damage out of at least one Hydra head, possibly multiple Hydra heads at the same time. Yeah, and he just takes all those damage dealing heads, especially the AoE ones, and he turns them into batteries for damage to reflect back at them. It's insanely good. Insanely good. As a bonus, he also has an AoE attack which can put decreased accuracy, which I think is pretty valuable, right? That's actually pretty valuable, and it makes it a lot easier to deal with, like the Head of Mischief in particular. Stealing your buffs, stealing your turn meter, you can potentially much more easily have enough resistance on that isn't an issue. It's an AoE attack, so it always hits as well. He also has a buff steal. Remove all buffs from a target enemy. It actually steals them if they're under HP burn that he placed. So that's another useful bit of utility that he brings as well. Along with the HP aura, by the way, combo him with Chameleon, put Geomancer in your lead. You actually get an aura out of it as well, which is great. And Chameleon keeps boosting Geomancer's turn meter, hence he gets out more HP burns and can deflect more damage. But yeah, it's simple, it's straightforward. You just build him as a tank with some accuracy, and he's like an absolute god tier damage dealer. It's insane, whilst also making your team way more tanky. This sounds small, 15% less damage, but that really adds up. It's very noticeable when you run a team with him and without him. You will notice the difference. So for me, that's why he's the best damage dealer. He's an epic. He's just a regular epic, accessible, right? He is an epic that you will probably get and doesn't need crazy gear. No crazy gear needed. Standard gear will work just fine. doesn't need crazy stats. He can even do the damn job at level 50, which is how I found him and did my videos on him in the first place. 3 minute level 50, and I was like, I wonder if he's any good. And I was like, wait, hold on. This guy's insane. What is going on? But yeah, that is Geomancer. So he is my number one. I think he has to be the number one. He ticks all the boxes. Accessible, tanky, keeps your team alive, and great single target damage. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention, but Quicksand Grass, putting the HP burn on, which then deflects the damage onto that Hydra head. This ignores the misdirect from Head of Mischief, so we can put it on just fine. It goes through Poison Cloud as well, so if Poison Cloud's on, doesn't matter. He gets it on. So good. So goddamn good. Literally, the only bad thing is you have to basically manual the fight, so you spread the grasp around to whichever head needs it at the time. But there you go, guys. They are my top 10 champions, the best damage dealers for Hydra. Let me know what you think. Did I surprise you with any of the choices? Were there any champions that you would definitely put on that I didn't? Any honorable mentions? Any champions that you have been using and having great success with? Or some clever builds, some clever tweaks, clever setups that you use to make them do more damage than people would expect? Let me know in the comments down below. I'll look forward to reading those. And as always, thank you for watching. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.